Hello, everyone. So this is the analysis for CAT 2021's afternoon slot, the slot 2. This is the preliminary analysis based on the feedback which we have received from our faculty and the students. So let's begin with the basic overview of how the exam looked like. So this is the sectional breakup. As you can see, there were an overall of 66 questions in this paper, and roughly the distribution of the questions across MCQ and theta was similar to the slot 1. Now, compared to 2020, the number of questions have significantly dropped to 10. So 76 became 66. But overall, there were about 47 questions in MCQ and 19 across theta. Now let's get to the section-wise difficulty. Now, considering the first section, which was the verbal ability and the reading comprehension, this could easily be considered a tough section because the readability was pretty difficult. So it was difficult to read certain passages. But if you compare it with the last year's CAT, the type of RCs in the readability sense, they were pretty much similar. Coming to the DILR section, that was again moderate to tough, at par with the previous last year's slot 2. And the same thing for Quant. Quant was also moderate to tough, but it was relatively tougher as compared to the slot 2 of the last year's exam. But overall, if we look at the entire slot 2, the entire paper, it could be considered as moderate to tough. So roughly on the same levels as the slot 2 of the previous year. Now coming to individual sections, starting from verbal ability. So the reading comprehension, there were 16 questions, and verbal ability, there were 8 questions. So out of a total of 24 questions, 5 were theta based. The theta questions were mostly jumbled sentences. All right. And then considering the reading comprehensions, there were 4 passages of 4 questions each. There was one RC on nationalism and colonialism, which had 4 questions. It could be considered as moderate to difficult, and it had approximately 550 words. There was one more RC on mono and multilingualism in globalization age, which had 4 questions. Now that was pretty large read, about 550 to 600 words, but the type of words used and the sentence structure was pretty much easy. So this was an easy read, although it was much longer. One RC was on knowledge and skepticism. This was a pretty difficult read. It had 4 questions and 450 words RC. The last RC was on philosophy. So basically on power, truth, and fiction. This was of 500 words approximately, and it could be considered as an easy to moderate. Now in the para jumbles, there were 3 questions, all of which were pretty much moderate. And in the paragraph summary questions, there were about 3 questions, as you can see, and all of those could be considered easy to medium, depending on the preparation level. And finally, out of context statements, there were 2, which were moderate. Now, overall, if we look at this section, out of the total 24 questions, if any student could solve 13 to 14 with 85% accuracy, he or she might land up with over 95 percentile. So that means in RC, you should have attempted 8 to 9, or in VA, the verbal ability, at least 3 to 4. That would be good attempts. Coming to the DILR section, overall, there were 4 sets only. 2 sets were having 4 questions and 2 sets were having 6 questions. Overall, this section was moderate. Coming to the breakup, 1 set was on bar graph, data interpretation. That was pretty much easy, calculation based. Then the next was on rating based, a mathematical reasoning set, which was having 6 questions. And it had, this particular slot had 2 questions on puzzles, or 2 sets on puzzles. One was on tournament and the other one was on bundles. Now the bundles set was pretty much tough. Also, it had more number of questions, so it could have been skipped at that point. Overall, if we look at this section, so the good attempts would be 2 sets, which means around 9 to 10 questions could have been properly done. Coming to the final section, which is Quant, this was definitely tougher than the morning slot, as there were few sitters compared to those reported in slot 1. But like in slot 1, this QA section was also arithmetic heavy. As you can see, this was the breakup. Overall, Quant was moderate to tough. Arithmetic had 10 questions. Algebra was having 5, geometry 3, and modern maths were 4. Overall, if you look, the difficulty level is broadly ranging from moderate to tough. In this particular section, the good attempts were about 11 to 12. Overall, The afternoon slot of CAT 2021 was moderate to tough and definitely tougher than the first slot, especially in QA, with a slightly more doable VA section and relatively tricky as well as time consuming DILR and QA sections. So an overall attempt of 32 to 35 questions with around 85% accuracy can be considered a good performance for this slot to get around 98 percentile. All right, so now this was the analysis for slot 2, and thank you very much. And the slot 3 analysis would be uploaded shortly.